I'm Jerry Winslet, along with Kenneth Ezell, and in this part of the course, we're going to be talking about water conditions. Water conditions affect water heaters in different ways. Water pressure, temperature, hardness, and pH all play a big role in the life and operation of a water heater. One of the most important conditions to pay attention to with water heaters is water pressure. Let's talk about water pressure in general, because I know, water pressures are just getting higher, aren't they?
Yeah, water pressures these days are getting higher and higher. When they go in to build a new subdivision, you have two options to deliver water to it. Either put in larger pipes that'll flow a higher volume of water, or put in a larger pump. It costs millions of dollars per mile to put in a larger pipe, so typically utility companies are putting in larger pumps. These bigger pumps are going to pump 24 hours a day. And what's going to happen is you're going to have decent water pressure when everyone's at home using water. But at night when everyone goes to sleep, those pumps are continuously running, and that's going to cause your water pressure to go way higher. Now, usually by code, we do not want to see any more than about 80 psi of water pressure coming to the house or to the water heater. But it's actually the homeowner's responsibility to control that. So if you don't have a PRV installed, your water pressure could be astronomical.
Yeah, and that's my next question. How do you control that high water pressure?
Typically what we'd want to do is actually check your water pressure to see exactly what you have. Here I have a water pressure gauge, and it has two hands on it. It has a black hand that shows me the real-time water pressure. Then it has a red hand to show me the highest pressure that the water pressure has reached. We want to leave this on a hose bib for about 24 hours because typically what happens is water pressure increases overnight when not a lot of people are using their water systems in their home, but the pumps are continually running. And so what's going to happen is, like I said, the hand's going to stay at the highest point. So your water pressure may be good during the day or when everyone's at home in the evening time using water, but at night when everyone's sleeping, that water pressure could get really high, and exceed that 80 psi. And so if your water pressure is going over 80 psi, typically what we suggest installing is a pressure reducing valve to drop that pressure from the high pressure and keep it to a more reasonable pressure, somewhere between 50 and 60 psi.
Another thing to pay attention to is hard water. Now, what is hard water and how does that affect a water heater?
What dictates hard water is the actual amount of calcium magnesium that's in the water. The more calcium and magnesium you have in the water, the harder it's going to be.
Okay.
What's going to happen is when you heat water, you precipitate that calcium magnesium out of it, and it typically builds up on the hottest parts of the tank.
Okay.
So say, for example, a gas water heater. You're going to start building up calcium on the flue and on the bottom of it. What that's going to do is it's going to make it harder for that burner or the heat from the burner to transfer into the water. So it's going to insulate all that.
Yeah, because it has to heat the metal, then the sediment, or the hard water buildup, and then the water, right?
Correct, which is going to make the water heater inefficient. Same thing on an electric water heater. The hottest parts of an electric water heater is not really the tank, it's going to be the heating elements. So your buildup is going to be on the heating elements, and it's going to make it really inefficient to transfer that heat into the water, through a big block of sediment built up on the heating element.
So how do you alleviate, or how do you, fix hard water?
Typically what we'd recommend is flushing and draining the water heater at least once a year. If you live in a really hard water area, you may actually need to do it sooner. But what we want to do is, as that stuff precipitates out of the water, we want to make sure that we don't give it time to build up and actually cook under the surfaces. Typically with a gas heater, you'd want to flush it maybe a little bit more often than an electric heater. Electric heater, pretty much the sediment's going to flake off and land in the bottom. Well, it's not going to stick to the bottom of the water heater. You should be able to easily remove that. But with a gas heater, the longer the sediment sits there, it will actually start baking to the bottom, which will insulate it even further. And like I said, makes that whole transfer of heat really inefficient.
All right. Is there anything else besides flushing we can do to fix hard water?
Well, typically what a lot of people do to fix hard water is install a water softener. What a water softener does is it replaces the calcium magnesium ions in your hard water with either sodium or potassium. But what that actually does is it makes the water more conductive and starts eating away at the anode rod faster.
So what affects the life of the anode rod?
Well, several things can affect the life of an anode rod. One is the actual amount of stuff that's in the water. This is what a new anode rod looks like. If you have really hard water, typically what happens is that you start insulating that tank and the anode rod won't do much. Right, so here's what a brand new anode rod looks like. Here's what one that's actually was working, that's been removed from a water heater. So if you start insulating the tank with that calcium and stuff, the anode rod won't really kick in and it's not going to do much, which means your anode rod is not going to break down, which means your tank's going to break down.
Okay, how often do you change an anode rod?
It just depends on your water and strictly how the water's treated. You can see, like I said, that's a new one. This is one that's working. You actually want to replace it before it starts to look like this. This means your anode rod is 100% completely gone and the tank is breaking down. So typically what I would recommend is checking the anode rod at least once a year to determine the depletion rate. If the anode rod is breaking down pretty quick within that 1 year, you'll know you need to change it every year. If you pull the anode rod out and it has plenty of material left on it, after a year's time, then you can probably let it go a couple of years before you check it again. If you pull the anode rod out and it looks like this, that means you're not getting any protection from the anode. Typically, if you have real hard water and it calcifies up, that's what you'll see, which could mean you actually have the wrong style anode installed in that water heater. But we always want to keep on top of it and check it, that way the tank can live as long as it can.
Okay, so that's why it's important to change your anode rods from time to time, just depending on the water conditions and the water quality in the area.
Correct.
What do we do about smelly or discolored water?
Where smelly and discolored water are both caused by non-harmful bacteria in your water supply reacting with the hydrogen gas produced from the anode rod as it breaks down. This bacteria, if it's iron-reducing bacteria, reacts with the hydrogen gas and creates rusty or discolored water. Typically looks brown or may even have a yellow tint to it. Smelly water is caused by sulfur-reducing bacteria reacting with the hydrogen gas produced by the anode rod, which makes your water smell like rotten eggs.
So what do? Take out the anode rod or get a different anode rod?
Well, you never want to take out the anode rod because then you're not going to have any protection. Your tank's going to fail really quickly. Typically what we'd recommend is increasing the water temperature above 140 and installing mixing valves at each point of use to prevent scalding. The hot water kills the bacteria that's living in it because the bacteria cannot live at temperatures higher than 138. Okay. So if you increase the temperature like that, it kills the bacteria, and then you no longer have anything to react with the gas that's being created from the anode rod as it protects the tank.
So we turn the temperature up, add a mixing valve at each point of use, turn the temperature up above 140, so we're looking at turning up to 150?
Well, we want to make sure that the water's at least higher than 138, so I typically recommend 150 degrees. That way we can ensure that we're reaching that set point. The high stored water temperature is going to kill the bacteria, which means you're not going to have anything to react with the gas from your anode rod, and so you'll never notice it.
So let's talk about water itself. Now, it's so corrosive, it's been called the universal solvent.
Yeah, and several things about the water can actually dictate that corrosiveness. One thing, if the pH is either high or too low, that's going to make the water corrosive either way. The flow of water, the rate it's flowing. Say you and your neighbor have the same water heater and you use 3 times the water, your water heater is going to fail sooner because of just the water flowing through the tank. We all know water flow can dictate how bad pipes are eroded and everything. You see in nature that the flow of water over millions of years cuts these awesome canyons out, and mountains and stuff. So it's really, really powerful stuff. It's one of the most destructive forces in nature.
So what can we do about the corrosiveness of water? I mean, or is there anything we can do?
Well, every water utility company treats water differently because they get it from different sources. And so it's hard for me to tell you exactly what to do with it. You can get water quality test kits and test your water, but what I would typically recommend is contacting a local water quality expert to come up with the best way to treat your water.
Every area is different, so contact your local water quality expert to find the right plan for you.